Hello and welcome back to the Hill and Valley podcast. Today we're going to be talking about traveling for work, some of our favorite adventures, and maybe some mishaps.
Yeah, so obviously that we're based out of Rochester, New York, but we definitely have clients based all over the place, and that's brought us, traveling across the United States for work. And there's a couple projects that we've worked on that really stood out to us that we've had to travel for, and we're gonna get a little bit deeper into those projects and talk about what was good and bad about them.
Yeah, I think we travel for like three different reasons usually. It's like we have a client somewhere else that we need to shoot for. We have a client in Rochester that wants something shot somewhere else, maybe to make it look different, different environment. Or we have a client that is located somewhere else and wants to send us to another spot, which is always very fun. A lot of logistics involved. You're typically producing these, so there's a lot of pre-planning, travelings in your background. What have you found to be the most difficult challenges, and what's the most fun?
Yeah, I guess, well, to start, it's having a client recognize the importance of like covering the expenses of travel. And like, we're lucky enough to have our clients cover our travel expenses, but then also having that respect for your client to make sure that you're like within a certain budget and like finding accommodations and finding flights and other transportation that are, comfortable enough to get the job done, but not, stretching it. I feel like a lot of people glamorize traveling for work, and honestly, it's not my favorite thing ever.
It's very different, right? It's not like, oh, let's stay in a luxury hotel. It's more so like, how can we do this as efficient as possible? This is our client's money.
Yeah.
We want to make sure we're being mindful of that.
And respectful, and it is really, it's not about comfort all the time. It's really about efficiency, like you just said. That's actually a really good word. It's about what's closest to where you're going, where you're going to be shooting, and it's also about being concise with your travel days, making sure your travel days are not necessarily the fastest way to get from point A to point B, but the most efficient way to get from point A to point B. And you have to take into account not only like flight costs, but then also flight patterns and like maybe driving a little bit further to Buffalo or Syracuse to take a flight out of there because it's a direct flight versus flying out of Rochester, which is more convenient for us, but might cause our travel day to be extended. So there's tons of logistics that go into traveling for work.
Yeah, and speaking about budgets and travel days, obviously there's the cost of traveling, which is a pretty literal cost. It's the cost of the flight, the cost of the accommodations, the cost of food, but we're also having to travel and charge for that because that's time taken away from us doing stuff for our other clients. How do you factor in a cost like that?
Yeah, it's kind of dependent on the client, but also I feel like, again, people glamorize traveling for work. Like, oh, well, I'm getting paid to travel. Like, it sounds amazing, but you have to factor in how much money you're not making because you're gone. So because of that, Adam and I are both huge assets to the company, as is everyone else on the team. But when we're traveling and we're not able to be at the studio, scheduling not only production, but also being in the office to have client meetings or do post-production or editing, that's money that you're losing because you're not working, right? So we've kind of developed a couple different travel rates that we charge our clients for just the day of travel. And it sounds like a little like weird maybe, but just to travel, like to spend probably on average 8 to 10 hours traveling in a travel day to get to your destination, when you factor in like door to door, like leaving your house to getting to your accommodation where you're going. And you can't really work on those days. Like, it's not always realistic to be like working in the airport or anything. So we have to charge accordingly, and it's basically a day rate. Sometimes it's a half day.
Yeah, it's like half of our production cost because we're not actually on set working, but we are, like you said, our time is being taken away. So that's something we have to factor in and make sure that it's accounted for.
Yeah. And I think that we've gotten to a place where we feel comfortable with our travel rate. It kind of, again, depends on the client, depends on the situation, depends on how long we're going to be gone. Mm-hmm. There's so many variables. Every single job is custom quoted that we do. Everything is custom quoted.
Yep. Yeah, we oftentimes will prioritize driving if we can, just because the other added factor to this is gear. Like, we have something that allows us to do jobs a little bit less expensive sometimes is the fact that we own all of our own gear and we don't have to charge rental fees. So when we can, we like to travel via car so we can bring all of our gear. But if we do have to travel somewhere where we're flying, we'll usually do like a 50-50 mix where we'll bring our most expensive items, like our cameras and lenses. Those are easy enough to transport. But gear that's too expensive to transport, like lighting or grip equipment, we'll oftentimes find a way to rent that while we're away, so we don't have to bring all of that, because that can add up baggage fees and,
Yeah, and checked baggage alone is super expensive. All travel costs are high right now, not just flights and accommodations, which are, way higher than they were pre 2020, but it's all those other, like, the cost of everything has gone up. So the more we can like avoid renting things on top of having to charge our clients for just getting us places is obviously most beneficial for all parties involved. We do like to, I think our like kind of rule of thumb is if it's within like an 8 to 10 hour drive, which is usually how long it takes, like I said, from door to door if you're flying somewhere. Usually if it's within an like 8 to 10 hour drive, then we'll just drive it and take the van and load up the van with all of our equipment. And sometimes we actually prefer that. We've driven to Cincinnati, Boston, New York City, pretty far, I would say, further than probably most people would drive.
Yeah, it's just so much nicer when you have your own kit with you. You know that everything's in there. It's reliable. There's been so many times where we've traveled and rented stuff, and I'm like, man, I really hope they included this thing that I would normally have, like this extra knuckle or this extra piece that I would have in my kit. But it's just like a big weight off your shoulders when we bring our cart. We know everything's on there. We don't really have to worry about, getting into a situation where we want to make something look a little different and we don't have the tools to do that. It's always nice knowing that we have those tools.
I agree. Yeah. Do you want to talk about maybe one of our favorite projects that we've traveled for?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about logistics, but maybe we could talk about an actual project that we've traveled for, or like our 3 favorite projects, maybe.
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind was last year, and I feel like we've talked about this project quite a bit of recent. We did a job for my alma mater, Milton Hershey School, which obviously is near and dear to my heart. Every project we work with them on is special and amazing, and the team, our client, the communications department is just phenomenal to work with. We love them so much. And this project we worked on last year was a mini doc, basically, and that video was an alumni story, and this alumni had passed away and donated a lot of money to an education foundation, and we had to travel to where he was residing, which was Fort Myers, Florida, which is where he lived before he passed, and then also where his greatest impact was, which was on the impoverished kids of Fort Myers and Lee County, right?
Yes.
So that was a really big logistical project. We had to travel to actually 3 locations. We had to go to Hershey, we had to go to Massachusetts, and we had to go to Florida.
Yeah, a lot of logistics involved, and I think you kind of took the wheel on producing that one in conjunction with their staff, which was really nice. But yeah, getting down there, getting all the equipment was definitely a big challenge, and I think the other part about it was that we had a pretty good idea of where we were shooting, but because it was more of a documentary, it wasn't like, oh, you're going to have these exact locations to film. It was kind of like, these are the buildings you're going to be filming in. You're going to be able to find something for an interview, something for B-roll. And so when you get into that situation, you definitely want to make sure you're over-prepared, and traveling kind of combats that because you want to bring less. So we rented some stuff. We made sure we had everything we needed for both interviews, lighting, audio. We brought a lot of our own gear to make sure that we were able to accomplish all that.
Yeah, we checked a lot of baggage for extra equipment when we went to Florida, and we did take the van to both Hershey and Massachusetts. But it was basically an interview in each location, at least one interview in each location with additional B-roll, with drone footage. So a lot of different things that needed to be accomplished in each location, and was also a very tight deadline.
Yes. That was probably the biggest challenge was like, hey, what are you guys doing next week? You know, like
Yeah.
coordinating with these people all in different states so that we can make sure that we're hitting all of these marks and getting all the footage we need in a timely manner so that we can edit it.
Yeah, and I think what I love about that project, not only the final project, which I think is a beautiful video that we created, and the story is amazing, and it's just very impactful and, again, near and dear to my heart. But I think what I loved about that project was that we were really able to meet these people from all different places and hear their stories. And we didn't have the privilege to know Jack Thomas, who was the alumni that we were highlighting. But it really felt like we started to get to know him, and it was like piecing together his story from all of these different interviews, and just being in the places that he was in, and just thinking about his story more was, I think, just like one of the coolest things from a storytelling perspective.
For sure.
And honestly, one of the things I would love to explore more in the future is more documentary work in that sense of highlighting other people's stories and just learning about them in a deeper sense.
Yeah, I feel like that project really embodied the essence of the school. It was like, not only did these people's stories have a really cool impact, but also the impact of the school and its, its mantra and everything was like
Yeah.
really, really cool.
Yeah, not to like go so deep into it, but Milton Hershey School, obviously, again, I'm biased, but just the mission to help people and how that the school's mission to help kids get access to education and lead better lives, and how that's such a snowball effect into like the alumni then going on to affect other people's lives and having huge impacts on the world without sometimes it ever going noticed. Jack Thomas did all of his donations anonymously until after his death, actually someone kind of outed him without his permission, kind of, because his impact was so great. It was tons of money, and he helped so many kids. And you just never even know who's helping you sometimes.
Yeah.
But that snowball effect is just beautiful.
That's exactly right. Like, even if he only helped one kid, like what that kid would go on to do to help other people, it's huge.
Yeah. So just that mission and that story was beautiful, and it was a challenge to schedule it all within a month and go to 3 different states in a month, but it was so worth it, and the video came out exceptional in my opinion.
Right. So let's switch gears for a second and talk a little bit more about a video that we made that was a little bit less of a documentary, less of a story, but more so centered around products. One time when we had to travel down to Florida again to work for a product-based company, a local product-based company, but a completely different idea. We weren't traveling to find the story. We were traveling for scenery, right?
Yeah. So we worked with, are you talking about the Gradient Fitness shoot?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Gradient Fitness is, again, a Rochester-based company, and we've been working with them for years. And they have some marine products. And obviously, Rochester in the winter isn't the best place to shoot anything in the water. So we did, he needed a ad for a marine anchor that needed to go out by the spring when the season is for those products to be bought. So we made it work, where we found some talent down in Florida and went and shot it in Florida, close to where my family is. So it was kind of like 2 birds with 1 stone, being able to visit my family and get some work done and escape the winter all at once.
Yeah, that's a good way to like get something done, but also turn it into a little bit more of a relaxation time too, because we were able to spend some extra days down there and enjoy the sun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was a really fun project because we got to do things a little bit differently, and filming in the water is always fun. And I think that really brought another element to the project, where around here we don't normally deal with. We have shot stuff in the water around here, but more so like the ocean, you know.
And it was a challenge producing that one again, because we're from Rochester. We don't really necessarily have a ton of connections in Florida, but we do, but not really. So I was just like cold DMing people on Instagram trying to find a model for the video.
Yeah, not only were you able to find a model, but you also found us a paddleboard place that was, didn't they give us the allow us to use the paddle boards for
Yeah.
like no money or?
Yeah, we ended up, big thank you to Jess, and she was awesome. She was so excited to work with us, just based on like what we had told her about needing to shoot this product, that she reached out to a paddleboard company and got us a paddleboard and all the equipment we needed to shoot the video. And they just did it in collaboration with us, which was amazing because we were on a really tight budget for having to travel in the first place, but then also
Right.
produce the video. It was a really tight budget project, but we were able to work with great people.
Yeah, I
and
think
it was
that's
awesome.
definitely something you learn through the years of production is like sometimes you're going to have the budget, sometimes you're not. And when you don't, you definitely have to be very strategic. And that's when you kind of like have to play to your strengths. You're really good at social media and networking, talking to people. And I think you hit the right people up. I think other businesses are much more willing. Like Jess has her own yoga studio. So she totally understands that like helping us out will eventually come back to her. Like we're able to work with her. And I think just the more you do, the more you get your name out there, the more you're able to make happen, whether you're on the giving or receiving end.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also, I feel like one of the struggles people have with traveling and finding resources in new places, right? You don't have the network in that area, so you don't necessarily know exactly where to start. And that's where having the kind of like not caring what people think if you hit them up and just
Yes.
cold DMing people.
You have
like
to be told no a lot before you get, anywhere.
Yeah, some people think you're weird, some people won't answer you, whatever, but then you find amazing people, and now we are still in connection with Jess, and she's been awesome, and we're going to go down there and take one of her classes eventually.
It's the power of the internet, right?
Yeah, it makes it worth it.
Yeah, it allows us to be based here, but also work all around the place, the country, all around the place, all around the world.
Yeah, but that was a great project, and I think it came out great. It is like a complete juxtaposition from the Jack Thomas video, just because the budget was so much tighter than the Jack Thomas video. It was also like much less work, but it was just, we were actually there for Mighty Paw as well.
Yeah, so we kind of were
So
able to double dip a little bit.
Yeah, we were kind of utilizing 2 different budgets for that project, which was great.
Yeah.
And that's how we got to make it work. But
Yeah, I feel like the moral of the story is like you can't, at least for us being in Rochester, like you have to know that like Rochester ends somewhere, and you have to be able to market yourself in other ways and other places. Not that I like have anything against being here, but
it's small.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're in New York City, I feel like working other places, it's just more fun. Like it keeps things different, it's more enjoyable, and there's so many different things going on in the world that staying in one place doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily always more fun, but it's definitely, like you said, always mixing things up and creating new opportunity. And it's usually harder to work outside of Rochester just because, again, you don't have the same resources. You don't have all your equipment all the time. But
Yeah.
it's definitely fun. And it's a little bit stressful, too, to travel and work because you're usually on a tight deadline. Like if there's any like travel delays, that could really throw a wrench in it. But
I guess what I mean by fun is like as a creative storyteller, I'm always interested in the stories that are out there and following them and not just trying to create something here, because you can do everything on a soundstage. You can make anything happen with virtual production, but the thing I enjoy most about being a creative is meeting other people, hearing their real life stories, and not always manufacturing something.
I agree. Yeah, no, I'm 100% on board with that.
So speaking of travel, do you want to dive into our next?
Yeah, so another project, or third project we're going to touch on today that involved a lot of travel and a lot of
logistics.
A lot of logistics. We started working with Jexy Los Angeles, which is based in Los Angeles. And it's
very far from here.
It's a jewelry company, and we were connected through a mutual creative. And the owner was like, we started with their website originally. We were just going to do their website, and we created a really great relationship with the owner. And she was like, you know what? I really trust you guys. I want to hire you guys to come out here and shoot the photos for the launch. She was like in talks with other photographers in LA. And this is one of the things I want to touch about most on traveling, and why it's really great for us traveling for work is we were hired at our Rochester rates and paid for travel. And we went to LA and we shot it. But our Rochester rates are much lower than an LA-based photographer's rates. And because of that, our client's budget, she got so much more for, I mean, it was still a large budget. It was a big project. But our client was able to maximize their budget by hiring a photographer and having you there. And we had budget for models. We had stylists. We had everything we needed. And
which is awesome. I feel like we were able to do so much more, make such a larger, higher end production with so much less.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like you said, if it was just one photographer there getting that rate,
they're
not going to be able to make all that happen.
Yeah, for everything that we did for that shoot, that would easily be just the day rate for another photographer in LA. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously never to say anything bad about, rates.
It's just cost of living.
It's just the cost of, doing business too. And I understand that the cost of being a photographer in LA is probably way higher, but it's beneficial to us and to our clients, because our clients, again, are maximizing their budgets and getting way more. But then also we get to travel. We have family in LA. We were able to see family while we were there that we hadn't seen since pre-2020. Mm-hmm. So that was special.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we got to go make some cool work and still get paid our normal rates,
Yeah, it was a great experience.
I think that a lot of creatives, on a weird spin-off note, is a lot of creatives will sacrifice their rates in order to travel. Do you know what I mean? People will be like, oh, if you pay for my travel, I'll come shoot it for free.
Yeah, mostly for portfolio. I mean, it's a smart move. If you get your feet in a new market, then other people will hire you. They're like, hey, I like that work you made there. Mm-hmm. I'll hire you to come out and do something similar. And then that's when you can start incorporating your travel rate and your rate and kind of mm-hmm. Making the best of it.
But I do think that at times that undercuts the market.
Yeah, at times. I mean, we're not out here working for free at any time.
Yeah, no, ever. But
we're not going to overcharge because you live somewhere that's more expensive.
Exactly.
We're usually very fair about that, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I think we definitely walk the line of, making sure all of our needs are met budget-wise, but also always thinking about the client and what their needs are and what their budget is, mm-hmm. and trying our best really to work within whatever they have.
Yeah, I will say another advantage of being local would be just in terms of logistics, like we talked about connecting with models and stylists, and you just have more variety. More people. You have more people that are going to be willing to help you out. But the biggest challenge for me would be working with other municipalities. We had to get a bunch of permits to film, mm-hmm. and that was a struggle because I couldn't just jump in there and be like, hey guys, I really need this permit. It was a lot of emailing, waiting for emails, calling people, and they were so busy that they didn't really have time to help us out, even though we're spending thousands of dollars on permitting. Yeah. That was a big...
Specifically LA. Yeah. LA is really hard.
Yeah, that was a difficult part of that shoot for me, was
making sure that you have the correct permits. We were shooting on Santa Monica, which obviously is a very highly sought after location for filming and shooting. And
yeah,
if someone walks up to you and says, hey, where's your permit? And you don't have one, you can get in a lot of trouble. So even though you may not get approached, you may. And if you do and you don't have what you need, it can be very bad. So
I just think the part that was most difficult for me was having to produce that from here. And then I felt like once I got there, everything had to be perfect. There's no coming back to redo it, because then all of that budget's gone. So just definitely makes you have to cross your T's and dot your I's a little bit.
I agree. Yeah, it's not as easy to just do it over as it is in Rochester or anywhere locally where you can just have people come back in and get it again.
Yeah. What would you say would be the most difficult part of any of these jobs or any specific challenges you've had?
I think my biggest thing is if we're ever filming or shooting in an area or location that you haven't physically been in before, just being aware of the spatial between things, how big rooms are. You know, photos can be taken with a wide angle, they can be taken with a tight angle. Sometimes you just don't know how large the space is. And when you account for, let's say, doing an interview and having all your lights set up and your tripods and whatever furniture is already in the room, like sometimes spaces get really tight really fast and you don't realize that when you haven't actually been in the space before. I think that's one of my biggest challenges.
That makes sense. What would you tell somebody who maybe does a lot of local work now and wants to travel more? Is there any like keys to success for that? Like a lot of our travel work has been all over the board. Some of it's been from people that live out there. Some of it's been from people that live here.
Yeah. I think a great place to start is if you're already going somewhere, trying to find work there.
Smart.
I've done this in portraiture before where I've been traveling for myself for, you know, whatever it is, visiting family or just us visiting somewhere for fun. And I'll advertise like, hey, I'm going to be in this spot. Like I'm doing portrait sessions at this price. I know that's definitely outside of the commercial world, so it's a little different, but creatives in general, like if there's a company you know that's located in the place that you're visiting, reach out to them.
That's smart.
But that would be where I would start.
Yeah, I feel like we've done that a little bit because we have a lot of bridges. Like we have a lot of connections in Florida. We have a lot of connections in LA. We have a lot of connections in New York. So like having those boots on the ground, like it's very low risk to go there and maybe stay with your family and shake some hands, talk to some people, or even send them a message, be like, hey, I'm going to be in New York this weekend. You know, I'd love to meet with you or work with you. And that is a lot easier than like a cold call, like, hey, will you pay me to come film for you from somewhere else?
Or even just proving that you've been in that place before. Like we have a lot of work now shot in Florida. Obviously we go there a lot because my family's there, but a lot of it also we've just been hired to do in Florida. But now that we have a lot of proof that we've been there and we've done work there, it's much easier to show people, well, this is what it would look like if I came there and shot your product.
This is my work in your location.
Yeah. And I mean, Florida is much different than Rochester, and that's why I keep using it as an example, like just the, you know, the tropical vibes, you know.
Got that, yeah.
So, yeah, that's a great place to start, is just traveling somewhere and creating work while you're there. Again, it works really well for like the portrait industry. You know, if you're shooting, you know, couples, engagements, weddings, elopements, stuff like that, just setting things up while you're traveling for yourself is a great place to start, but also making some work while you're there and then sending it over to some people, you know?
Yeah, it's important to have a portfolio for, like, we're just building out these portfolios now of all different industries because we want to show, hey, we've worked with people like you before, but it's important to also say, hey, we've worked in your location before. We can make something that looks like what you want.
Has there been a specific project or time when we've been traveling for work where you felt like you learned a big lesson, like something went wrong or something, you know, happened, you weren't prepared, or anything that you learned like a lesson?
Learned a lesson? Not so much. I feel like when you're traveling, you really take it seriously, and like we always, like I said, cross our T's and dot our I's. So things usually actually go a little bit more smooth than normal, I think, because you got pretty much one shot. I mean, you're not going to do all that work of traveling again and not get the result you wanted. I think your tip on making sure you have accurate photos and accurate representation of where you're going so that when you get there, it looks the way you want. I guess the biggest takeaway I would have would be instead of relying on a location that fits the story, unless you're shooting a documentary, instead of relying on a location that is like, this is their house, we should film in their house because it's available to us, it's where they live, that's part of our story. I would always opt to rent a location if possible. That way it's set up nicely. There's no like, oh, actually the so-and-so is coming over today, so we can only use this corner, or actually, you know, you can't move that. That way this is our location, it's a film set. We're going to move whatever we need to move to make it however we want. Whether it suits the story or not, I think that having less distractions, and less interruptions is far more ideal than having something that is true to life or fits the story.
Yeah, I think it can get sticky sometimes when working in people's homes and, like you said, moving things, or sometimes people just feel like you'd think that people feel more comfortable in their space, but once you get in there and all the lights are there and then the camera's there and we're moving their furniture around, it can almost feel like a little invasive. And I think sometimes it's more comfortable if you just have your clients showing up to a set and, you know, everything's good to go. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. The reason I have that note for traveling specifically is because, like, here we always have plan B. We always have our studio. We always have locations that we know of that we can always rely on. But when you're traveling, you don't know if you're going to have a fallback location. So you have to make sure it's it.
Yeah, I agree. Where would your, like, dream travel job be? I know mine.
I would say if I were asked to travel anywhere to film anything, I would be the most excited if it were in like the Pacific Northwest, because that really fits the vibe that we want our work to look like. We always like when it's misty and it's an outdoor brand. So I would say like this, you know, if you were to say, like, what's your dream job? It would probably be like go film something for REI in like Seattle area.
Yeah, that's pretty much mine. I was going to say like Canada or like, you know, anywhere hiking.
Yeah. If someone was like, I need you to come to Banff to film a commercial for my snowboard or my hat company, I'd be like, I'm in.
I would do it for free.
Secondly, any story like the Jack Thomas thing, love that story. I think that was just like so pure, and like we didn't really, there's no manipulation on our part. It was very different from like our commercial work where we weren't like, how do we shape this into something? It was kind of like,
let's just
let it flow and let it melt into something. Yeah.
And it was, again, like particularly special because we were learning the story. Like we didn't know him. So there's that like a little bit of unbiased third party coming in to like learn the story. So sometimes I was asking follow-up questions genuinely because I was curious and I wanted to know, like I was intrigued. I was invested in his story. Not like I was reading a list of questions and being like, okay, you answered it the way I wanted you to. It was me actually being like, okay, but like what?
Yeah, there's no right answer.
Yeah, it was very special. I love that video. I'll think about that video forever.
Okay.
Okay, any other travel related tips or tricks or anything that you would have?
I don't think so. Not like generally. I think I have probably tips for like gear and stuff to bring, but that's about it.
Yeah. I think that my biggest tip always when traveling is just having a really solid itinerary. You want to know, like, down to the hour, like, where you need to be when. No one ever accounts for transportation time, like, making sure that your lodging is in a close vicinity to where you're shooting, even if it's, you know, more expensive or if it's less nice or whatever it is. Like, you don't want to be any more than like 30 minutes from your shoot location where you're staying, just in case there's, you know, a million different factors that could come up that you don't know. You don't know the traffic patterns in the place you're traveling.
Yeah.
There's so many things.
You end up in Buffalo and it's snowing.
Exactly. So that's my biggest thing, is just knowing, doing the Google Maps, doing the like, how much do things cost, making sure that no unforeseen travel expenses come up that you're then fronting because that didn't go through the client. You know, you want to approve the budget with the client first and not just like be like, oh, and then I was slapped with this $100 toll for taking this highway. And it's like, well, that's on you now because that's not your client's problem, you know?
Right. That's what we call crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's my biggest thing, is just making sure you're on it with the itineraries.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that information. I feel like it's very valuable for people. So I hope somebody gets something out of it.
Thank you for being my travel buddy.
Absolutely. Anytime. Well, thank you guys so much for watching this episode. I hope you guys got something out of this. If you have any questions about anything travel related or our work, please feel free to leave us a comment.
Yeah, I would love to hear about any of your experiences traveling for work. I know that there's probably tons of horror stories out there. We're lucky enough to not have anything crazy have happened, like, you know, missing flights or anything like that. But I would love to hear your good and bad travel stories. So leave those below, and don't forget to follow along and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and let us know what other episodes you think we should do. I don't think we have a terribly long list of queued episodes to film, so let us know if there's anything you guys like the direction of or you think we should talk a little bit more of. And we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.